This is yet another movie that I didn't think our town would get because it's iffy on the independent films, the artsy films. They're very picky on which films they choose if it's not mainstream and very popular. But this is one of those movies I was really looking forward to, especially when it showed the trailer so often in our movie theaters. For at least a month, maybe even 2 months, there were 3 trailers, no, scratch that, 4 trailers that were shown almost every time we went to the movie theaters. Those trailers were Bleed for This, The Edge of 17, A Monster Calls, which we'll probably get that in January. I heard that the wide release of that film is January, and if that's true, A Monster Calls will be a 2017 movie for me. And then of course the 4th being Nocturnal Animals. But even with all those trailers shown for the movie, I still wasn't quite sure if it would actually come because we saw a lot of trailers for Demolition. We never got that. So Nocturnal Animals, a lot of people are trying to say that this is a very complex story, and it is, in a way. But honestly, I feel it's pretty straightforward. I mean, sure, it's got 3 narratives all rolled up into one and a story within a story, but how the film is handled with such finesse and maturity, I thought it was very straightforward to me. So in the present time of the film, our main character is played by Amy Adams. Now she plays an artist that is pretty high class, has pretty much everything she could ever want, but she still feels sad. Now one day she receives a manuscript from her ex-husband, who's now a novelist. This novel is called Nocturnal Animals, and it's a thriller, a very disturbing, pretty dark thriller. And it is dedicated to her. Now this is where the second narrative comes in, because instead of her just reading it, we get to see it as she perceives the novel, especially with the characters being played by the same actors of the real world. Jake Gyllenhaal is in it, same with Amy Adams and several other people. Well, not several, there's 3 people actually, which is the main family. Now in this thriller, Jake Gyllenhaal plays a guy who loses everything and terrible things happen, and it is disturbing. It's definitely a thriller. A crime is committed and he has to try to solve it, not solve it, but find out the people who did it with the help of Michael Shannon, who plays a really awesome detective in this movie. But as Amy Adams' character is reading the novel in present day, she has flashbacks of what life was like while she was with Jake Gyllenhaal's character, the actual novelist, the person he plays in the real world, and how that breakup occurred. And these 3 narratives weave into one in a very coherent and very great movie. So what did I like about this film? Well, nearly everything. The acting was great overall, especially the 4 main characters. Now Amy Adams has the most subtle performance in the film. Now unfortunately, even though she's the main character of the film, even though she has the overall character arc that is most prominent in the film, some people might find her boring or not notice her acting style in this movie as much because the other 3 are a little bit more over the top. But I like Amy Adams in this film, and I like her character despite me not liking her at the beginning, because she starts off in the first part of the movie as this artist. She has everything she wants, like I said, but she doesn't feel that it's enough. But as the movie progresses, she starts realizing how much she's hurt Jake Gyllenhaal's character, how much she regrets the things she did in the flashback, and you see what she's become, how she regrets it, and the overall story is her trying to change back into something else, trying to get away from being her mother. As usual, Jake Gyllenhaal is really great. Same with Amy Adams, he plays 2 different characters, even though Amy Adams is doesn't have a lot of showtime in the actual thriller novel aspect of the film. Jake Gyllenhaal is the main character in the thriller, The Nocturnal Animals, while he's a side character in the real present day life and a co-star in the flashbacks. Actually, he's only in the flashbacks, he's not in any of the present day stuff. But yeah, he kills it as usual, and he's really great as these 2 different roles. But no matter how great Amy Adams and Jake Gyllenhaal are, they're absolutely amazing in this film. Unfortunately, despite them being as amazing as they are, they might be the most forgotten because there's two other actors in this film that are more of character actors that have a very different character from what we're used to seeing from these actors. Michael Shannon plays a detective. God damn, he is amazing as this character. This character was one of the most entertaining things of the film. No matter how dark and twisted the film got, you can count on him to add some humor to the film, because he has some dark sense of humor in the film, but he's just so much of a badass as well, and he has so many really good lines in it that he becomes a very memorable part of the movie. I can understand people liking him the most over the whole four characters of the film. Even though Jeff Bridges is really great in Hell or High Water, I think Michael Shannon has him beat as my favorite detective this year. But one person that really blew my mind was Aaron Taylor Johnson. Very different from any other role I've seen him in. He is a terrible creep in this film. He's slimy, he's greasy, he's just oozing with slime and green sludge. You just love to hate him in this film. He is phenomenal. Even when I saw him in the trailer, I'm like, this is gonna be one sick individual. And by God, he is one sick, twisted fuck. Give him a nomination for supporting actor in a role. This guy is freaking crazy. This is an extremely well shot movie, well directed, greatly acted, just overall amazing. The novel part of the film, the story within a story, the thriller aspect of the film is probably the most entertaining thing in the overall film. It's gripping, edge of your seat, dark and gritty and just nasty. I think a lot of the mainstream audience that doesn't like artsy stuff, that doesn't like independent films that are different and unique, will gravitate to this thriller because it is easily one of the most entertaining part of the film. This is one of those films that has the ability to entertain in a very thrilling way, in an edge of your seat way, while still being thoughtful and metaphorical and symbolic and artsy. There's so much of this film that I loved. And even though it can be argued that the thriller aspect of the film could be its own movie, and we don't need any of the present day stuff or the flashback stuff, just give me the thriller, I think the thriller part of it does add to the overall story, does add to the present day and the flashback story of the film. In fact, not only does it become the entertaining factor of the movie, because without it, it possibly could be bland and boring to some people, it does give us a better understanding of what Jake Gyllenhaal's novelist character really feels about the breakup between him and Amy Adams' character. Because that's ultimately what the novel is. It might have a different narrative. It's about a thriller. It's about someone losing something. It's about him trying to take revenge on this one greasy, terrible, slimy character. But it is a representation of what Jake Gyllenhaal's character felt like when his heart was pretty much ripped open from Amy Adams breaking up with him and doing something so terrible I'm not going to mention because it's something you need to see. Yeah, Amy Adams just doesn't break up with Jake Gyllenhaal's character. She does something else that's really pretty much unforgivable. Or at least if I was in Jake Gyllenhaal's shoes, I would find it very hard to forgive. Very hard to forgive. I'm not going to spoil it, but that's something else in this film that I have mixed feelings about, because it's a very small moment in the film. It's a very short scene. It's sort of like just thrown out there. It's really hard to explain, but it's something that just comes out of nowhere, and you're just sort of, oh, it's just like sort of mentioned briefly, like what just happened through the dialogue, and somehow that makes it the most shocking of how small that scene is. It's just like, holy crap, what did I just hear? She did what? And so when she discovers that Jake Gyllenhaal finds her in that same scene, then it just sort of cuts off. It ends with him, that one shot in the trailer where Jake Gyllenhaal is looking at her, she's in the driver's seat, and the rain is pouring down and he's just staring at her. That's the end of that scene. So part of me loves how small it is, yet still impactful, but another part of me wants it to be expanded on a little bit more. But then again, I guess we get that through the narrative. We get that through the novel part of the film, when we do understand what Jake Gyllenhaal is feeling through his main character of his novel. I loved the ending in this film. It has very mixed feelings for me, but in a very, very good way. What I mean by that is throughout the movie, I started caring about both characters. We see it through Amy Adams' character's perspective, and we see her growth, we see her change, we see what terrible things she's done, and we see how much she regrets it and how she wants to go back to the way things were. And so because of that, we have redemption for that character, and we really feel for her. At that same time, we feel for Jake Gyllenhaal's character because we see what happens to him, and we understand how he feels through his novel. And so I found myself rooting for both characters, and with the way that ends, one person gets it their way in a very, very symbolic way. Well, maybe not symbolic, but very fitting way, while the other one loses. And I felt great for the one who wins, and I felt terrible for the one who loses. It's both gratifying and heartbreaking. I don't think many endings have done that for me. This is one of those endings that's just like pure masterpiece, at least in my opinion. This is nearly a 5-star movie for me, but it has a few things that I have to mention that I didn't quite like. For one, even though the beginning of the movie sets up things pretty nicely, I did find myself a little, not bored, but I felt like, okay, we get it, but I don't really care for this character, and I think you're not supposed to really care for Amy Adams' character at the beginning, but it really made me just not like her until her character arc starts forming in the film. For me, the first act of the film just felt a little too slow and just a little too sort of But everything after that, downright amazing. And I'm not just talking about the thriller aspects of the film. I'm talking about the present day stuff, the flashback stuff, and the thriller stuff. All amazing. Basically, this movie really, really picks up once she receives the novel. Everything after that moment, pure 100% greatness. Sometimes the way the movie transitions into the different narratives of the film is very beautiful, is really visually great, but sometimes feels a little too obvious and a little too, okay, did they really need to go that route? The beginning of this film, other than the slow first act of the film, the opening sequence of the film, one of the most uncomfortable moments I've ever had in the movie theater. It was one of those things that is so weird, so out there, and so full of nudity and weird sort of that I wondered if I was watching this actual film. I wondered if this really was Nocturnal Animals until the title came up, and then I'm like, okay, it is Nocturnal Animals. I did not think it was going to start this way. And I think it was meant to be uncomfortable in some way. I think it was meant to show that she doesn't really love what she does anymore. She's sort of out of tune with modern art, and modern art is weird, and she has friends with some weird people. I think it's meant to be uncomfortable, but I think it could have been done in a different way. It's just the way it did it in this movie is just a little like, okay, I'm not actually liking this part of the movie. So, like I said, it's almost a 5-star movie. It's almost like a 4.9, but I really only deal with wholes and halves. So for now, I'm going to give Nocturnal Animals 4.5 stars. So, did you see Nocturnal Animals? What did you think about it? Go ahead and comment below. And if you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and check out my movie reviews of 2015 or 2016. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was just my opinion.